I wonder if the baby in your belly is okay, hee hee. It was a momentary event, and I couldn't understand what had happened, but hearing my mother-in-law's voice brought back the recent memory. I had come to get the garden cleaning tools in the garage, and my mother-in-law had crashed into me with the car. Moreover, from the words I heard, it seemed like this wasn't an accident. "What are you doing?" I wanted to shout, but I couldn't even move as my consciousness was hazy. In a situation like this, one would usually worry about their own life, but I, being a pregnant woman due in a week, worried more about the baby in my belly. However, aside from worrying, there was nothing I could do, and I lost consciousness. I regained consciousness in the hospital. When I looked at my husband, who was calling out to me, I noticed that the baby was sleeping, and I realized that my belly had gotten smaller. Apparently, I had given birth while unconscious. I was disappointed to have given birth without awareness, but I was relieved that the baby was safe. Also, it seemed my body was fine, and I could be discharged in 2 weeks. However, I couldn't celebrate the safety of the baby and my discharge wholeheartedly. I had to confront my mother-in-law, and so I headed to my in-laws' house in my husband's car. As I seethed with anger in the car, I spotted my mother-in-law crossing the pedestrian crossing just before reaching their house. I couldn't forgive my mother-in-law for putting the baby in danger. She was going to pay for this, even if it meant her descent into hell. I am 28 years old and, until recently, I was a housewife who used to work as an office worker. I resigned from my job when I became pregnant. Although I wanted to continue working, I had to give up my job because I live with my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law is 60 years old, and she had been living alone since my husband, Caleb, moved out when he got a job. She had divorced her ex-husband when Caleb was in elementary school. Even though she's still healthy, we expect she'll need support in the future. So, we decided to live together with my mother-in-law after getting married. Even when my pregnancy and childcare settle down, and I return to work, I might still inconvenience my workplace due to having to take care of my mother-in-law. To avoid causing any trouble at work, I decided to quit my job. Thank you. Now both the child and my mom can rest easy. I'm sorry for making you quit your job for my sake. My husband and mother-in-law appreciated my decision to quit my job. What are you both saying? We're a family, so supporting each other is natural, right? And once childcare settles down, I plan to look for part-time work. Since then, for the past 3 months of not working, I've been living a peaceful life with no issues. As a pregnant woman, a trouble-free and peaceful life is the greatest happiness. However, after 5 months of pregnancy, as my belly gradually grew larger, my mother-in-law's behavior started to change. Hey! Isn't this miso soup too strong? Are you trying to make me sick? Such complaints became a daily occurrence. Is it too strong? I'm sorry, I thought it was the same as always. I'll make it a bit milder next time. You became a housewife, so it's only natural for you to excel at housework. Just because you're pregnant, don't think you can be lazy. When my husband left for work, my mother-in-law would start nagging and try to push household chores onto me, a pregnant woman. Why did this typical daughter-in-law harassment start? I can't think of any reason, but did I do something to upset my mother-in-law? I considered warning my mother-in-law or talking to my husband, but I didn't want any trouble at home before giving birth. Fortunately, my mother-in-law's harassment wasn't severe, so I decided to brush it off and get through it, until the birth. However, it seems like this decision was a mistake, and the cause of regret. Hey, you're in the way! Your big belly is in the way! A month after my mother-in-law's harassment started, it was still ongoing. In fact, it escalated, because she seemed bothered by the fact that I was handling it casually. Zoe! That's dangerous! Your belly is in the way. I don't want a grandchild. You should get rid of it. My mother-in-law began to intentionally bump into me and shove me when passing in the hallway or using the bathroom, claiming my belly was in the way. She even said she didn't want a grandchild. Is she seriously saying she doesn't want a grandchild? Regardless of my mother-in-law's true feelings, it would be a problem if I were pushed and fell. In fact, I've already been pushed by my mother-in-law a few times. And almost fell. I've endured it until now, but I decided to talk to my husband about my mother-in-law's harassment. My husband warned my mother-in-law, but instead of stopping the harassment, she escalated it further, believing she had been tattled on. Why should I be resented by my mother-in-law, just for discussing it with my husband? Household chores were completely dumped on me, the amount of nagging increased, and her physical aggression became stronger. I considered having my husband talk to her, but that might add fuel to the fire and make the harassment more dangerous. I don't want the harassment to escalate further to the point of direct violence. So, I decided to spend the remaining time until childbirth protecting my belly. 4 months passed, and I had just 1 week left until my due date. I managed to endure the harassment somehow, and it seemed like I would be able to give birth. Thinking that way, I let my guard down. I used to clean the garden twice a week. I did this not because the garden was dirty, but for some light exercise. The garden cleaning tools like a broom and dustpan were kept in the back of the garage. When I went to get the cleaning tools, I found my mother-in-law in the driver's seat of the car, seemingly with intentions to go somewhere. I thought about waiting for the car to leave, but my mother-in-law was rummaging through her bag and showed no sign of pulling out the car. So, I decided to get the cleaning tools. The space between the garage wall and the car was narrow. It might not feel so tight if my belly wasn't large, but with childbirth approaching, it was a bit uncomfortable. I passed by the side of the car and retrieved the cleaning tools from the back. That's when the car's engine started. If only she had waited for me to leave the garage. Instead, she's spewing exhaust fumes at me. More harassment. In the next moment, I found myself lying on the ground. Did the baby in your belly kick the bucket? Haha, grandchildren just become a hassle if they're born. I couldn't understand what had happened in that moment, but upon hearing my mother-in-law's voice, my recent memory resurfaced. My mother-in-law had reversed the car and rammed into me. Moreover, from the words I heard, it seemed like this wasn't an accident. Up until now, no matter what kind of harassment I endured, I thought it was okay, as long as the baby in my belly was safe. However, this time it was clear that she was targeting the baby's life. This is simply unforgivable. Why would you do such a thing? I want to scream, but my consciousness is hazy and I can't even move my body. In such a situation, one would worry about their own life, but I was more concerned about the baby in my belly. Is the baby okay? If I were to lose my life, is it possible for just the baby to survive? I feel like I thought about various things, but aside from worrying, there was nothing I could do, and I lost consciousness. When I regained consciousness, I was in a hospital room. "Are you okay?" "I'm relieved." My head was still fuzzy, and I couldn't recall the situation clearly. As I was trying to remember why I was lying in a hospital bed, I noticed that the baby was sleeping beside me. There was some slight pain in my abdomen. It seemed like I had given birth while unconscious. My husband explained the situation to me, as I couldn't comprehend it. Apparently, I was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance immediately after the car backed into me. It seemed that quickly putting the broom and dustpan I had in front of me played a small role in protecting me. However, the impact of the accident caused a placental abruption. Placental abruption can cut off the supply of blood and oxygen to the baby, so I was rushed to the hospital and had an emergency cesarean section. The baby and I somehow survived, and it's now the day after the accident. I regret giving birth unconsciously, but as long as the baby is safe, that's what matters. I was really surprised when I got the call that you were taken to the hospital in an ambulance. As time passed, and my head gradually cleared, I started to remember various things. Who called for the ambulance? I think it was just me and your mother, in the garage, right? Huh? My mother called the ambulance. She apparently pressed the accelerator instead of the brake by mistake. Your mother said that? It must be a lie. Since the target was not my life but the baby, my mother-in-law immediately called an ambulance and the police to handle it as an accident. She also told my husband that it was an accident. Well, it's unlikely to say she was targeting the baby. I conveyed the words my mother-in-law said before I lost consciousness to my husband. Did the baby in your belly kick the bucket? Haha, grandchildren just become a hassle when they're born. My consciousness was hazy, but I remembered this statement clearly because it was shocking. It was definitely not a misunderstanding. Upon hearing my story, my husband seemed shocked as well. For now, let's put aside my mother and focus on resting for your recovery. I'll handle the rest of the arrangements. In the end, due to the injuries from the accident, I couldn't be discharged until 2 weeks later. It seems that this was considered a relatively quick recovery. During these 2 weeks, my husband and I discussed our future plans, and he implemented the decisions we made together. Furthermore, when my husband returns home, he'll have to face my mother-in-law, but we mustn't let her catch on to our plans. I only informed her about my physical condition and used the excuse that, due to the accident, I still don't want to see her, so I made sure she didn't come to visit. On the day of my discharge, I headed to my in-laws' house in my husband's car to confront my mother-in-law. As I was burning with anger in the car, I spotted my mother-in-law crossing the pedestrian crossing just before we arrived at my in-laws' house. I hope you experienced the same thing. Just crash already. I wanted to say that, but of course, I couldn't. My husband noticed my mother-in-law and honked to get her attention. Hey! Where are you going? I told you to wait at home, didn't I? Oh, you're back sooner than I thought? I was planning to go shopping for dinner, while Caleb was at the hospital. Never mind that. Get in the car quickly. There's something more important than dinner to discuss. I looked at my mother-in-law, and my anger rose. I didn't realize it at the time, but I had raised my voice significantly, and my expression was quite intimidating. I don't think I'll ever feel such a strong surge of anger in my life again. My mother-in-law, overwhelmed by my anger, got into the car quietly, and we returned to my in-laws' house together. We are leaving this house. Upon arriving at my in-laws' house and starting the discussion, I immediately presented my conclusion to my mother-in-law. Wait a minute! What's all this about suddenly? Are you angry about the accident? It was just a mistake, confusing the gas pedal and the brake. I'm getting older, so it's unavoidable, right? So, you'll forgive me, won't you? That wasn't an accident, it was deliberate, right? You were aiming for the baby in my belly, weren't you? I heard your words. My mother-in-law, seeing that I wasn't moving, and believing I had lost consciousness, didn't seem to realize that I was still conscious at that moment. So far, my husband has only informed my mother-in-law about my physical condition, so this is the first time he's hearing that I was conscious. Clearly, my mother-in-law's expression showed anxiety. You heard my words? But were you conscious when that happened? Even if you heard them, there's no evidence, right? There's the possibility of your misinterpretation or false accusations, isn't there? Would Caleb believe such words? Perhaps she thought that speaking to me would put her at a disadvantage. My mother-in-law turned to my husband. Mom, you've been mistreating her all along, haven't you? There have been incidents bordering on violence, and you even told her to abort the child, right? Are you telling me to believe your words? Zoe, why did you dislike me, giving birth to the baby so much? I asked a question I had avoided so far, wanting to avoid any trouble until the birth. Grandchildren, they're nothing but trouble. My mother-in-law had been divorced when she was young, and had raised her son as a single mother, so she didn't have much money. She believed that if a grandchild was born, she would need to celebrate birthdays and special occasions as a grandmother. She thought she wouldn't be able to afford buying things, like school bags and study desks, and not being able to do so would make her feel miserable. Also, having raised her son as a single mother, she had no desire to go through the hardships of childcare again. I had intended to work part-time once childcare settled down, so she thought that she would be burdened with taking care of my grandchild. While she was happy when my pregnancy was confirmed, as she saw my belly growing, these feelings became stronger, leading to her mistreatment. As the due date for childbirth approached, my mother-in-law, thinking that the grandchild would soon be born, apparently devised a plan to harm the baby by crashing into me with her car. I used to clean the yard twice a week, so the act was straightforward. I understand your feelings, but I will never forgive you for targeting the baby. No matter how much you cry and beg, we're leaving. I'll take the baby and return to my parents' house, and my husband has already rented a weekly mansion and is preparing to leave. Mom, it's unfortunate, but that's how it is. For now, we're leaving this house, and we've prepared everything for the transition. During the 2 weeks we were hospitalized, we made preparations to leave the house. That's true, it's my fault, so it can't be helped. I understand. Once she knew the preparations were complete, my mother-in-law gave in. She seems to consider our departure from the family home as atonement for her actions. However, I, the one whose baby was targeted, won't forgive her so easily. Are you trying to end the conversation on your terms? We're not finished. If anything, we're just getting started. What else is there? My mother-in-law appears unaware that there is more to discuss. I was hit by your car. I expect you to pay me compensation. Compensation? But you didn't mention anything for 2 weeks. Why now? It's only natural after an accident. Did she think that nothing would come of it? There's no statute of limitations for traffic accident settlements. The time limit for filing a personal injury damages claim is 5 years, so it's perfectly fine not to contact you for 2 weeks. Did you feel secure just because there was no contact, and because I'm a family member? The reason I haven't said anything until now is to confirm that there won't be any lasting injuries for me and the baby. We'll have a lawyer contact you later, so we won't go into too much detail. But based on the accident and the injuries, the compensation could be around $35,000. In addition to being abandoned by our family, my mother-in-law turned pale upon learning that she might have to suddenly pay $35,000. My mother-in-law only has compulsory liability insurance, and I know that. The insurance probably covers up to $12,000, so she has to pay $23,000 out of pocket. Furthermore, my mother-in-law doesn't have much money. Their family home is rented, and her car is a used compact car with no significant assets to her name. Consequently, she will have to find a job at the age of 60 to pay off the debt, but given the current situation, it's going to be quite tough. Initially, I consulted with a lawyer about her intentionally crashing into me with her car, hoping to press charges for bodily harm or trying to cause a miscarriage, but without evidence, it was challenging. However, after hearing the amount I could claim in compensation, I thought it would be a sufficient payback, so I decided to legitimately claim accident compensation. Now I have to live a tough life on my own, and I can't afford to pay that much money. Look, in a few years, I might need home care or something. You're moving out, but we're still family, right? You won't say such harsh things, will you? Now, my mother-in-law was bringing up the term family. Someone who tries to harm a baby's life can't be considered family, right? Caleb, you won't abandon me, will you? I worked hard to raise you. My mother-in-law shifted the conversation back to my husband. I appreciate that. You raised me as a single mother. But, Mom, you went too far. I have stronger resentment for someone who attempted to harm a child's life than gratitude for raising me. With my husband's words pushing her away, my mother-in-law became speechless and stopped talking. Since my mother-in-law stopped talking, we decided the conversation was over, took only the essentials, and left the house. I felt a bit sorry for my mother-in-law, but considering she targeted the baby's life, this outcome was certainly well-deserved. Until we find a new house, I'll be staying at my parents' place, and my husband will be in a weekly mansion. Starting from the day we left my in-laws' house, my mother-in-law began calling us. She asked for forgiveness, wanted us to come back, and such. We have no intention of forgiving her, so we always rejected her words and hung up. Despite this, she persistently called us, so my husband and I blocked her calls. We haven't disclosed the location of my husband's weekly mansion, and it's unlikely my mother-in-law would come to my parents' place or call. By eliminating all means of contact with my husband and me, she seemed to have given up and started searching for work. At 60 years old, her job options were limited, and she initially began working part-time at a nearby restaurant. However, due to her poor memory and slow hands, she was treated as a nuisance, felt uncomfortable, and quickly quit. Additionally, it seems she accidentally spilled hot soup or boiling water from a large pot on her thigh, causing burns that prevent her from working right now. She also appears to be struggling to walk, either due to the pain from the burns or the tightness of her skin. If these issues don't interfere with her daily activities, she must continue working. She's been abandoned by us, and she has to pay me compensation, so she has no choice but to work even if she doesn't want to. Let's hope she recovers from her burns with patience and perseverance, and then she can work again. My husband and I are currently searching for a new home for the three of us, considering whether to rent or buy a house. Thinking about our child's future and planning our life ahead is something we're very grateful for right